Hey, how is everybody doing tonight? Okay. First off, a couple of critiques were added. So that everybody knows beforehand, if you want to follow along, and you'll have to stop and pause this, and I do want you to notice, yes, House GKar, you are on this list. These are the items that you will need for this evening. So we'll be doing a side of Brussels sprouts. We're doing a ale onion broth, and we are doing grilled Mediterranean vegetable sandwiches. So this is what you'll need for this evening's hopefully delicious meal. All right, let's get rid of that. Okay, so what are we gonna do first? That's right, I explained it last night. If you haven't heard, for the past 2 weeks, 2 months, washing our hands. So we're gonna wash our hands and we're gonna get going here. And I actually already washed my hands, so I'm just doing this just to demonstrate how to wash your hands even though you can't see. And as I saw Sanjay Gupta acknowledge the other night, make sure that you wash your thumbs also. People generally wash their hands and forget all about their thumbs. Okay, so tonight, one of the things that seems to be an issue for a lot of individuals is timing everything so that everything is ready when you're making more than one thing to go with dinner. Can you grab one more yellow squash out of the... So, gonna wash these really quickly. I do want to say while I'm kind of getting some of this stuff ready, is that I had a couple of people make some comments on the, it's in the refrigerator, on the right hand side in the vegetable drawer. I heard a couple of people's comments, and I wanted to acknowledge those because I thought they were important, but I wanted to let them know what I was thinking. Is that somebody had suggested that I have everything already cut up and ready to go. Because that's what they do on cooking shows on the Food Network and the Cooking Channel and whatever other channels have cooking people on them doing crazy cool things, right? That's not really what we're about right now, because we all have time. And part of what happens is that we end up watching these shows, everything's already cut up and ready to go, and I think it's only going to take 22 minutes to make something, and then when I go and I sit down, and after I prep all of the food, get everything cut up, sliced, diced, lions, tigers, bears, oh my, I realize it actually takes an hour and 10 minutes, not 22 minutes. So we're kind of doing this in real time. The only thing I'm stopping for is like last night, marinara cooking for 30 minutes. The other thing, this is for my brother, because I guess as I was commenting last night that you should always have a sharp, good knife, when I was cutting the onions, he's particular enough that he was aware of the fact that my knives needed to be sharpened because he could tell by how they were sounding on the onions. Don't ask me, that's a pretty specific skill, but I'm not going to argue with him. So there you go, brother. I'm not going to say his name because he's not the one broadcasting to the world. Okay, so what we're going to start with are eggplant. Remember last night I told you my mom bought eggplants, so we're going to figure out what to do with them. We're doing that with them tonight. Yellow squash, I've got 2, and zucchini, I've got 3. So what we're going to do first is we are going to get these cut up, and we're going to toss them in some oil and a little salt and pepper, and we are going to let them sit and marinate while we're doing some other things, because eventually we're going to be grilling them. But that will only take a couple of minutes. So we're going to let them marinate for a little while we're getting everything else prepped and ready and cooked. Because again, tonight, one of the things that a lot of people say they have a hard time with is managing the food that they're cooking so that everything is ready at the same time. So we're going to start with these guys. You could have done this earlier today, but I didn't want to be filming all day long, so I'm just going to kind of do this, as we need to. So, back to the basic philosophy of this. This is to hopefully help people cook better, but at the same time, it's to be on a more realistic schedule. So what we're gonna do here, and this was, I'm gonna try this and see if this works out. This was another individual's response that said that they would like to be able to see how we're actually cutting things up. So, the zucchini, we're just gonna cut slices like this. I don't even know if you can see what I'm doing at the moment. So we're gonna do this like this. And we're just gonna slice these into long slices because these are gonna be made up for the grilled portion. So for those of you who do a lot of grilling, you know that if you make things too small, they just fall right through the grates, and there's nothing worse than watching something that you have prepared fall through the grates. So we're gonna take our 3 cucumbers. You can, and this really depends on, if you really love cucumbers, use 5. Like, there's no rule. That's the beauty of cooking that I think that most people forget, is that this should be like, cooking should be fun, and it should be tailored to your family. So if you're not a big fan of zucchini, then just use 2. You don't have to use the same proportions. These are just ideas of basically what my family would go through. So we're gonna slice those up like that. We're gonna do the exact same thing for the yellow squash. You can see about how thick or thin, depending on which way you want to look at it, that I am cutting these so that they're sliced up so that when we grill them, they're gonna grill up really nice. And hopefully it works out. I don't know how we're gonna do the recording outside because it has been raining here all day, and I am not sure if it is still raining or, okay. Just got weather update from the Weather Channel, called my child, and it is not raining outside right now, so we should be good. So we're gonna slice these up. Again, guys, I am not a master chef. I am not a classically trained chef. I am just a guy who likes to cook, and this is my kind of little Zen moment, and I like spending time in the kitchen. And I love my daughter because she just said I'm really good at it. Okay, so here, now we're just gonna slice going this direction for the eggplant, which we would find a way, right? For those of you who bought eggplants the past 2 weeks and you're like, oh, I have to make eggplant parmesan. No, you can do other things with eggplants. It doesn't have to be just with, eggplant parmesan. So we're gonna make grilled Mediterranean sandwiches out of these tonight, and they are absolutely delicious. And, oh, sorry, just found out I was out of the camera zone here. Again, don't have a camera crew. So we're just going to slice these up, and we are going to get them nice here so that, you can kind of see. My son told me that he appreciated that I held up some of the vegetables that we were cutting last night, but that maybe giving a different angle would be a better perspective. Okay, so here's all of our vegetables. So now we're just gonna take them, and let me get you out here because we don't need to keep looking at that view. Okay. And to be very technical, let's move this right there. Okay. So, we're basically just going to toss all of these actually into a very large, dun, 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 dun. No, not quart, that won't work. Let's see if this works. Okay, so we're just going to take all these vegetables. We're going to toss them into a bag here. Might have to do 2 bags. We're just going to plop all these in here. Yeah, let's use 2 bags. Okay. We're going to take some of our olive oil. Olive oil is good for just about everything. So we're just going to not douse, but put olive oil in here so that these can kind of just marinate just a little bit. It's going to be really simple. Normally we would use ground salt, but seeing as that's not an option right now, we'll be using regular, just good old-fashioned salt. Olive oil, you just kind of put in there. Put some salt in there, and put some pepper in there. Really? How's it possible? I grabbed a pepper without any pepper. Okay, there we go. Okay. Close this one up. Just kind of shaking around a little bit. Get everything mixed up in there. Really that simple. Set it aside. Okay? We'll do it for the other one as well. I know that some of you that are watching this might have a hard time with it because you might want to know specific measurements. So that's not really, unless it's a brand new recipe that I have never cooked before, I think that in the kitchen you should be playing with a lot of different things and sampling a lot of different items, whether it's spices, whether it's oils, whatever it might be. Sampling them together, putting them together, seeing how things taste when they're mixed together. So that for me is, unless it's, like I said, unless it's a brand new recipe, you're going to be one of those people that might be frustrated because I'm not telling you specifically how much. So you're going to take this oil, you're going to mix it in here, you're just going to kind of stir it up a little bit, get the salt and pepper mixed around, shake it up a little bit, and then we're just going to set this aside and we're just going to leave this sitting while we start getting other things ready. Like I said, we're going to be grilling those, so it's not going to take very long to get them going. Okay, so we're going to make an ale onion broth tonight with some potatoes. So we're going to take these baby potatoes, little new potatoes. We're going to wash them off. And this is just one bag. And this is, it doesn't actually say how many ounces or anything, but this is colander is pretty small, so it's just that much. So we're going to take those. We're just going to rinse them off, make sure you get any dust, dirt, grime, dog hair, whatever it is that collects at your house, you're going to get that stuff off, okay? Those are pretty straightforward. These we're just going to cut in half. We're not really doing much with them. If they're little, small baby ones, we're not even going to cut them in half. We'll just leave them whole because these are just going to cook in the broth, and that's what they're going to do. So we're just going to cut these up in half. Not a big deal. This is super fun. If I was, cool filming crew, I would speed this up so that you would be seeing me work in very fast motion. But again, that's not the point of this. People, we're building community. If there's one thing that we're going through right now that we've forgotten about, is that we're a group of people together. And we need to figure out how to be together even when we can't be together. And so sometimes being fast might not be the only option that we need to do. So we're just going to cut these up. And the thing that I love about cooking is that going back as far as we can, it's really not until the modern world where this whole idea of instantaneous food, going to Burger King or McDonald's or, not that it's fast, but going out to eat because it's convenient. This is a really new thing in our history. Making food and preparing food is something that has a very long history that we often don't really think about, especially the people who are making it. Like the people who are setting aside their time out of their day to make sure that the people that surround them have nutritious meals that are good, that they use whatever they can to cook with. And that's a bad potato, so we're not going to use that one. Okay, bad potato. Okay, so our potatoes are almost diced and sliced. But there's nothing fast about cooking. I mean, I remember when I was a kid, when we got our first microwave, and all of a sudden it was like this amazing technology. You didn't have to cook an egg on a stove anymore. You could just throw it in the microwave and boom. You could throw a turkey in there. You could throw whatever you wanted in there. And all of a sudden Americans were happy across the board because of all the time they were saving that they didn't have to make food together anymore. And I have a hard time with that. Okay, so unsalted butter. Now I have some because I just bought some, unless my baker has used all of it. Okay, unsalted butter, because we're going to have other flavors in there, so we're just going to use unsalted butter. Let's go with, say, 3 tablespoons. And we'll use 3 tablespoons of butter, okay? So we'll get this going on the stove. We're going to get the onion ale broth cooking, and we're going to throw in some barley into it and a whole bunch of fun stuff. I'm really all about using medium heat. So again, we're going to put it on medium heat so that we can start tossing in all of our goodness and get this broth going. So we've got our pearl onion, we've got our potatoes. We're going to use pearl onions. Recipe calls for about 8. I think that pearl onions are pretty awesome, so I'm going to use maybe a few more than 8. So what do we got here? 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. We're going to use this many. So about 15, okay? So you're going to you don't want to cook these with the skins on, so go ahead and remove the skins. Nothing fancy about it, but just like a regular onion. But you're not going to cut them apart. You're going to cook the onions whole. The petite onions, you're going to cook these, or pearl onions, you're going to cook these whole as they are. So you're just going to peel off, which I hate peeling pearl onions. Maybe I should have done this part earlier because it's going to take me forever. But that's okay, because if you're watching it, you have plenty of time. Well, that's a good point. You can fast forward. If you don't want to watch me peel onions, then you could fast forward. That's exactly a great point. Okay? So we're just going to peel all of these onions, but not cutting them because we're going to cook them whole in the broth. All right? Yeah, well, we're cutting off the ends and then taking off the skin. I will explain later. You'll notice tonight that I do have on a different apron because we are going to be grilling, and this is my grilling apron. This is my super fancy Volkswagen apron. And a couple of you will appreciate, especially for those of you who grill, you will appreciate some of the stuff that we have going on here. Okay, so we'll keep cutting along here, and then we'll get all these things peeled. Our butter is slowly getting melted, and then we'll get that going, and then we'll start on a couple of other things. So Brussels sprouts are delicious, and hopefully tonight I'll give you guys it's not a different way of preparing them, but for those of you who eat Brussels sprouts or who have eaten Brussels sprouts, most of us think they're really gross because our grandma made them for us, and she boiled them in a bunch of hot water and literally killed them because they turned into a big pile of mush. So we're going to try something different. Well, not different, it's how we make them all the time. But I'll show you how we make them, which you can find plenty of recipes out there to do something similar. But just simply roasting Brussels sprouts is a world of difference. And if my kids will eat them, I'm pretty sure that anybody in the world would eat them, because it all depends on preparation. How you make a meal, how you prepare a meal is the biggest difference in how people like it. And sorry for those of you who like mushy, gross Brussels sprouts that have been boiled to just yuckiness. but that's not how we prepare them. And for those of you who have had Brussels sprouts that way, hopefully you will give them a second chance because they're pretty tasty. They're pretty good. You can do them a variety of different ways. Sometimes you can toss on some cheese onto them and let them, roast that way. But we're just going to do just a straight grill. There's there's actually just one spice that goes on it, and that would be absolutely delicious. Okay, so our butter's melted. So what we're going to do while we're peeling these onions here, we're going to take all of our onions, these are potatoes. We're going to take all of our potatoes that we just cut up. We're just going to toss these in here. We're just going to let them kind of cook and sort of slowly saute in the unsalted butter. I had to ask my wife the other day because I really don't know what's the difference besides the obvious. What's the difference between unsalted and salted butter? Obviously I get the obvious is that one of them has salt and one of them doesn't. But if you're going to be tossing a bunch of flavors in, the things that might have salt on them, you don't want to use salted butter because it just adds even more flavor. So based on what we're doing tonight, we are going with unsalted butter because we don't want any more salt flavors in there. There's already going to be a lot of flavor going on in the broth, so we want to keep it pretty simple. Okay, so again, demonstrating how you do two things at once. It is possible to saute something and be doing something else. So we're just going to keep peeling these onions. We have a couple more. Note to self, if I ever do this one again on here, I will definitely do the onions beforehand. And my dad has a good point. There are some things that maybe should be prepped ahead of time, but I'm just doing what I'm doing. And obviously there are a variety of different ways that you can do things. I had somebody point out that they normally will do the garlic and saute it before they toss the other aromatics in. Again, it's just, some of it is a matter of preference, some of it is a matter of how you want to do it. Last night was one way. A lot of times I will do the aromatics, the garlic, the onion, the celery, prepare them first and then toss in other vegetables. But this is just the way we're doing it tonight. Okay, so got our potatoes, they're cooking, sauteing in the unsalted butter here. And I wish we had smell-o-vision because then you would be able to smell how good the potatoes cooking in the butter smells. So it's quite delicious. It smells good. Okay. So we're going to get some water because we're going to throw in some bouillon cubes. I am totally cheating and not making a vegetable broth from scratch. So we are cheating. 4 cups to start with. Okay. So we got our potatoes going here. They're doing their thing. Because potatoes take a little bit to cook, and so we need to, but they are baby potatoes or new potatoes, so usually I have a potato tester in my family. She's always the one that tastes them to make sure that they're ready. So we're going to keep those going right there. Now we're just going to toss in some water. So we're going to start with 4 cups, and then because tonight I'm using the Maggie vegetable bouillons, one of these is good for 2 cups. So I just kind of crumple them up, toss them in here, not a big deal. It's all going to get mixed up together. Put in 4 cups, so I'm going to use 2 of these. And then it should totally work out just fine. If you have other vegetable broth that you use, if you want to make vegetable broth from scratch, totally cool. Just means you have to start earlier in the day and let those vegetables simmer and cook all day long so that they will do their thing. Okay, so we're going to get that going. Once this gets up to, we get it up to a nice boil here. So we're going to turn the stove on to high, let it get boiling. And then we will toss our onions in, and then we're just gonna let that simmer and do its thing for a while. And then we'll come back to it because the last 10, 15 minutes we're gonna toss some barley into it. We also have some azafran because that is saffron, but my wife, when she was in Spain, grabbed some saffron there for me because for those of you who don't know, that is where saffron originally came from and then moved forward into the rest of the world. And it amazes me how stupid expensive saffron is. So we're gonna take this out, and you can see like even this, for this one in particular, show you here, is folded up nice and neatly into this little teeny tiny piece of paper, which let me see if I can even get here and get into it. So that you eventually, do I have some in there? Get to your saffron, okay? Saffron's pretty potent, see? So all you gotta do is just take a pinch of saffron. You don't need more, just a pinch. And you're just gonna sprinkle that in there. And then you're going to, depending on what you have, put it all back together, put it into its little handy dandy protector, close it up, set it aside for the next day. Okay, so we're gonna let this get going right here, and then once we get the broth going, we will cook it nice and let it do its thing. Now some of you, if you wanted to, you could put like, this would be a really good dish for lamb. We don't eat meat in our house, so I am using a product called Field Roast, and it's a vegetarian sausage. This one is a apple maple sage. So we're gonna treat it though just like it is a sausage, and it's wrapped up in a nice little skin and all that sort of stuff. So we're gonna take this off because this is gonna go in there as well, but you could put in, you know, I don't know if I'd put beef in it. I don't know how well that would be, but something like lamb or mutton, possibly goat, you could put in there, and you would want to cook that meat ahead of time so that it was ready to go. So what we're going to do is we're just going to cut up the vegetarian sausage, and we're going to set it aside because vegetarian sausage does not, you can't cook it for hours and hours and hours because it is a vegetable product, which means it will start to break down, and then it won't have really the texture or the consistency that you're kind of thinking of or ready to go. So we're going to have that sitting right there. Our broth with potatoes is getting pretty close. Then we're going to toss our onions in, and then I know that House GKar, you will be thrilled to death. This is one of the items in there. This is a warm Guinness. It's been sitting open today because preferably you want it to be flat. So that's going to go in there, and that's going to give a ton of flavor. Really brings out a lot of flavor. So we're going to get those going. Once we get the soup or the broth completely going, because tonight you can't see outside, but I told you earlier it's raining, so we're kind of going with soup sandwich sort of idea for dinner. So this is now starting to boil, which is good. So what we're going to do now is we're going to take our pearl onions, we're going to drop those in there. Remember, you're not cutting them up, you're not slicing them, you're just dropping them in there whole. So what we're going to do now, we're going to take our beer, we're just going to pour our beer in there. Obviously this hasn't been sitting long enough because it's not quite flat enough. So we're just going to take our beer and we're going to pour it in there. This is going to give it some serious rich flavor. You can use any dark beer that you want, but as House GKar would suggest, this is the nectar of the gods. And to remind you guys that just like yesterday, anytime you use beer, wine, whatever, if you're making a vodka pasta, a vodka sauce, when you cook it when it's boiling, there's the dogs. All of the alcohol is burned off. Okay, so we're just gonna leave this now. We're gonna let it just simmer and do its thing. Okay, so we've got our sausage here. We'll keep that, we'll toss that in when we toss the barley in. Let me get this stuff out of the way. So what we're going to do now is get our stove oven set at 425 just ahead of time. So go ahead and get it preheated, because that's what you're going to need for the Brussels sprouts. So we're going to get our Brussels sprouts. I love when you're able to get the ones that are on the that are still on the stalk, but those you don't see very often, and right now you're definitely not seeing them. So we're just using good old-fashioned Brussels sprouts. Again, for those of you who grew up with cooked, mushed grossness, these are much better. Let me wash these off really quick. Okay, so these are really easy. All we're going to do is we're just going to cut the little nub off of the end because it's a little hard. You're going to slice them in half, toss them into a bowl. That's all that we're doing with these. Again, this is something that if this were the cooking network, I could have done ahead of time, but that is not the goal that we are aiming for. So we're just going to toss all these in here. So I had a variety of people make comments today about what we needed to change, what we needed to do differently. And all I could think was, we've only made one cooking lesson, I guess. It's not a cooking show. But we've only made one of them, so give us a moment to adapt and figure out what we're actually supposed to be doing here. Because I am literally making this up as I go along. So, anyway, so we're gonna cut up all of our Brussels sprouts, cut them in half, and that's it. Nothing fancy here. We're gonna just, maybe I got too many, I don't know. I can tell you though, when you make Brussels sprouts, it's gonna make your house stink. So make sure that all the people that are having them are actually in the house, rather than waiting until your significant other is going to come home and walk into a big Brussels sprout fart. So usually better if you make it while they're already home, because then they won't notice the smell is bad. But Brussels sprouts, yeah, you know, it's all good. So we're gonna get these. All we're gonna do with these is toss just a little bit of olive oil and some aromats, which is a simple little product that I get at a World Market. And it's basically an onion, clove, mint spice that you just toss with it. And it's a German product, and according to the sources closest to me, I am the only person who actually uses it this way, and they look at me like that's crazy, and then they taste it and they're like, I've never seen that spice used for that purpose. So again, be creative, because cooking is supposed to be about being creative and having fun. It's not supposed to be this laborious process that everybody seems to hate. So, should be good. So all we're gonna do here, now that we've got our Brussels sprouts done, cut up, we're gonna take some of our olive oil. You're just gonna drizzle some olive oil on it. You're going to take the spice, which is right here. This is what it looks like, so if you want to go get some, you could use anything else, salt, pepper, whatever. So all we're going to do is just sprinkle some of this on here. Again, no rhyme or reason. I go a little heavy-handed with it because I like it. We're going to take this, we're just going to toss it, mix it up. That's it. Once our oven is preheated, we'll throw it in the oven and we will let that get going. And that's really going to be all that it takes for the Brussels sprouts. They take about 35 minutes. Just lay them out on the pan. And once you toss them in the oven, that's really all you're going to do. You're just going to throw them like this, throw them in the oven. Stove, whichever it is. Okay, where are we at? We've got our broth is cooking right here. Bring down here so you guys can see what it looks like. So here's our broth. So you can see we've just got the potatoes in there, the onions in there, they're cooking good. We've got our oven preheating. We've got our Brussels sprouts ready. We've got our veggie meat on the side that's going to go in the broth. And in a short amount of time, then we're going to grill our vegetables. So we're now going to let the broth cook, and we're going to let the oven preheat. These have to go for 35 minutes. We'll be back in just a short amount of time so that you do not have to sit and watch us watch something else.